All right, I'll go over mine now. And if I get done and if you think like, well, geez, mine's better than his, that's good. I don't feel at all bad about that. I didn't spend much time on it, but I made a comment out of the handout, so that's it right there. And I don't know why I've got locale in there, but I do. I don't think I need that. All right. I did put a decimal format in because I wanted to format the BMI to 2 decimal places. All right. You may have done that. You may not have. Now, be real leery about this. I didn't put this in. All right. But when you see this, something like this that says import javax.swing.star, when you see the star, what I'm used to at least is everything that's there and all the way down. You know what I'm saying? That's usually the way it is. In here, normally the way it is it's everything on that level. You know what I'm saying? Not down, but everything on that level. So a lot of times when you put a star in there like that, and I didn't put that in there, I don't know why that's there, but it is. So this is what I put in here for my constants, a minimum height, a maximum height, same with weight. Then I use these. Now you may or may not have done this, but I said the minimum optimal weight is 18.5. So I could check to see if you were less than that. And the reason I use this, and the maximum optimum weight, and the minimum obese, the reason I use these is I'll tell you that you can almost bet that over time those are going to change. All right? So, and here were my counters or accumulators, not counters, my accumulators, total underweights, total optimal weights, overweights, and obese weights. Again, this was the pattern that I put in. All right? And here were my variables. So each person has their own height, weight, BMI, and status. All right, and again, you can see what that is. Just to continue the program. One thing that I'm going to insist upon is even once we get into Android, because you're just going to be writing Java, all right, but that you modularize everything, okay? And you'll know because we'll be doing a bunch of it. So input the height, input the weight, calculate the BMI, calculate the status, display the height, weight, BMI, and status, ask the user if they want to run the program again, and when you fall out of that loop, display the final totals. And hopefully you did something similar to that. The input height and input weight are really virtually identical to one another. Again, could have probably been written as one routine, but to me it made more sense to do them as two. So ask them, enter a height between, and I actually put these in there, so it'll say enter a height between 12 and 80, whatever it was, 86 or whatever it was, 96 I think. And then parse it. So there is not error handling being done on this other than out of range. So if you put something in that is non-numeric, it's not going to cover it. We are going to go over that stuff. All right, so, and then again, the weight is the same thing, basically. All right. And then I've got calculate BMI, where you pass in the height and the weight, and here's the formula. Now, you can say here height times height, totally fine to do. All right, but there is a math.pow in here, just like there's a math.pow in Java and in most programming languages. So I use that. For the calculate the status, again, this is one thing, I just want to kind of impress upon you. So you'll notice in here I'm saying if it's less than this, do this. If it's less than this, do this. If it's less than this, do this. If it's greater than or equal, that should cover everything. But I'm not putting in a final else. I guess I could have, all right, and had it say something like, this should never happen or whatever, but I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. All right, make your own decisions, I guess, on that. And then to display the individual stats, the same kind of thing. And again, I did the format for the BMI. That's the only thing I use that format for. Running the program, again, I already showed you that. All right. And then displaying the final totals was right here. All right, so I guess, again, my guess is you all did something fairly similar to that. All right, so let's go. What we're going to do between today and tomorrow is we're going to rewrite this twice. We're going to first rewrite this as a more or less an object-oriented Java program, but then tomorrow we're going to add a lot more error handling and exception handling in there so you can see it. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use the same folder that I created called BMI. And I do want to mention to you, now you're not going to turn these in, okay? But I am going to give you another assignment tomorrow to take a look at, all right? And all I'm going to ask is from now on, and I'm not complaining or anything, and some of you are doing it anyway, but when you create a repo, you're all naming it almost the same thing. So if you want to call it BMI, that's totally fine. But call it like Gleason-BMI, McCardle-BMI. Because then when you give me the, when I'm grading them and I've got it, and there's only 5, I know it's not that hard. But, I don't know if you do this or not. I haven't done this, but how many of you up at the top of your program put your name up there? You know what I'm saying? And it just makes it easier for me. If you don't mind, I'd appreciate it. So I'm going to come in here to source. I may be able to steal some of this stuff, so I'm going to leave that up there. But I'm going to come into source. I'm going to do a new Java class. And this one, and since the first one was BMI, I'll make this BMI02. Again, you can make it whatever you want. It really doesn't matter. It says, do I want to add the following file to Git? Well, notice, because I've already created the repository, so I'll say, yeah, add it. And we're going to get into this. We're going to get into some Git very shortly. So there we've got that. I'm not going to put in the same comments again. I could do that. I could just copy that in, but I'm just going to leave it the way it is. All right? So we're going to do a couple of different things here. Make sure that I bring that with me. No. All right, that's going to be interesting. All right, well, we'll have to write it. That's okay. All right, so I've got public class BMI02. Now, we're going to put something in here we haven't created yet. Did you all hear me? We're going to put something in here you haven't created yet. Because not always, but quite often when people have a lot of constants, like we kind of are getting in this program, rather than putting them right into your class file like this, you put them into what's called an interface. Now, one thing about Java, like C#, is a single inheritance language. All right? What, if you may or may not remember, but when we used inheritance in C#, we used the colon followed by something. So you said public class, child, colon, parent. Here, it's public class, child, extends, parent. So we're going to use the word extends. Don't worry about that right now. But the point is, again, just like C#, Java can only inherit from one class. But it can implement as many interfaces as possible. Or as, I shouldn't say as possible, as desired. Which means 0 or more. So if you've got a program where a lot of different people are working on it, you might have a lot of people create interface files. So when you put them together, all right, that basically they'd be working with them. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say implements, and I'm going to call it IBMI. Now it's implements, not implement. All right. Now try that again. IBMI. There we go. Now it's red because I didn't create it yet. So don't let that bother you. It's also pretty much the way it is that when you create an interface file, you start it with the letter I. In fact, really, so let's just say we were doing, I don't know, let's say we were doing a Java program. This just came into my mind. It's kind of stupid, but on India, we would try not to start it with an I, because anytime you start something with an I, all right, it's considered that typically it's going to be an interface. All right, so I'm going to come in there, I'm going to create that right now. So I'm going to right mouse click on source again, choose new again, go to Java class, but this time I want to choose interface. You with me? All right, and again, I'm just going to call this IBMI. Now there's differences between interfaces and classes. We're going to get into all this stuff, all right, but there are differences between them. You'll notice in here, one of the differences is it's public interface instead of public class, all right? And it is not possible at all, any class with a main in it, you can run, And there's other classes that, basically you can run, but an interface isn't meant to be run like a class is meant to be run. Hopefully what I'm saying is making at least some sense. All right, so what I'm going to do is in here where I've got this public interface, I'm going to go back to my older copy, and I'm going to grab all of these constants that I put in here. All right, I'm just going to grab all of them, and I'm going to put them in here. All right, now when I do that, you'll notice I don't need private anymore. The reason that I've got the word static in here is that if this stuff is going to work with main, and main is static, then these have to be static, kind of the way that it was in C#. All right? So that's all I'm going to put in here for now. Am I going to put anything else? Well, I want to mention something to you, and that is you can put variables in interfaces. You don't find that happening all that often, but you can. We're also going to get into, and I don't know if we did this in C# or not, we're going to get into the topic of abstract classes. And I've given you examples like this before. So if I had a class named animal, and underneath it I had a class named dog and a class named cat, animal would be an abstract class. Because the class itself is so generic in nature, you wouldn't create a new animal. You'd create a new dog, or you'd create a new cat, or whatever. All right? So that's all we're going to put into this. So I'm just going to do for now, I'm going to do a file, save all, and I think, at least, I might have to open it again later, but I'm going to close it. Okay? All right. Now notice that the red should have gone away on your program because we have implemented that. We have the interface. All right. So I'm gonna put in here, and I want you to get used to this terminology. So first we're going to put in our class instance variables. All right? And they're going to be pretty much exactly what we had earlier. All right? So again, they're pretty much going to be these. So I'm going to grab this, and I'm going to put it in. Now that said, I'm going to make a couple changes. First of all, I don't need this again thing. I don't need that. Notice I get no errors in here. I don't get any errors. But I'm going to make all of these private. By their very nature, typically, class variables are going to be private. I may or may not have given you this very simplistic little definition when we first started on this stuff, whenever that was. But if you want to look at object-oriented programming from like a 35,000 foot, so from the airplane view, it's using public methods, all right, to modify private data. This is the private data, all right, and we want to have control over how that data is being modified. So by making it private in the class, it can only be done in the class, and by creating associated public methods in the class, that's how that's basically, again, that's how we're going to end up doing the modification. All right, and like I said, hopefully that made at least some sense. All right, so those are the instance variables. And I am going to create one more variable. I'm going to grab it just right from where I had it over here. Where is it? There. This pattern formatter. Now, you don't have to do that. All right, you don't want to do it, then don't do it. But there it is. And again, it's very simple. All right, notice now when I copied it over, at least it put that in automatically. And if it doesn't, you're going to have to either add it or do the control or the alt-enter, whatever it is, to add it. And I'm saying, and I'll tell you what, just so you know this, if somebody has a BMI that would hold up to 999, they're dead. Okay? I mean, I put in like a person was very, very small with like 333 pounds, and it came up with a BMI like in the 60s. So if you're at 999, no. Okay? All right. So that's in there as my formatter. And that's a non-class variable. All right? It's just something I put in there so that the program would work a little bit better, in my opinion. All right? Again, you may or may not agree with that. Now, you saw this before, and we're going to do very similar to what we did earlier. Okay? Now, we're going to come in here, and we're going to create first our no Arc constructor. right, when we get done, we'll do our full Arc Constructor. Now, when you start creating constructors, first of all, if you don't create a constructor at all, you all with me? If you don't create a constructor at all, this is what would get created right here. If I never created a constructor, all right, it would be this. Public, and what do we call this? BMI 02, paren, curly, curly. That gets created for you. Does that make sense? So if you never create one, that gets created. It doesn't do anything, but whenever you instantiate it, it's got to have a constructor that it'll call. So it doesn't put it out there where you see it, but it actually creates that for you. All right? Now, what do we want to do here? Well, the same kind of thing as far as, you know, we could come in here and make some defaults. In fact, maybe we could even do that inside of here. So in other words, let me bring that thing back up again that, do that. Where? Over here. I'll bring up that BMI again, this one. And, you know, we can give default first names, default last names, etc. If we want to, we could put them in here. No with it. I'll just leave them in here. Or, you know, what are we going to do? We could manually put them in right here. So in other words, we're passing in nothing. So what we'd be doing right here is we would be creating a brand new BMI 02 object and passing in nothing as a parameter. But we still have to account for the height, the weight, the BMI, and the status. All right? In fact, why don't we we'll put in a private string, first name, and a private string, last name. Okay? We'll put those in. Again, you're not turning this in. I'm just going over this because I'm trying to be complete with this stuff by no later than Wednesday of next week. You will have had your test on this, and we're going into Android. Now, when we go into it, you're still going to be using the majority of the stuff that you're learning right now. But Android's an animal into and of itself, the way that it handles certain things. All right? So, I mean, I want to get as much of this stuff out of the way as possible so you've at least been exposed to it by the time we jump into Android. All right. So we come in here, and now we've got to account for 1, 2, 3, 4. These 4 things. Don't worry about the BMI because that's something that's calculated. Don't worry about the status because that's something that's calculated. But we want to make sure that when you create a new individual, they have a first name, they have a last name, they have a height, and they have a weight. All right? Now, we could do this in a lot of different ways. That's why I mentioned this. For example, just so you see this, we could have come in here and done this, right? We could come in and say static, final, string. We could call it like def first and call it, you know, no first name. You know, we can do that. And then come in and do a static, final, string, def last, and say no last name. And then a static final int, and we could give it a default height. I don't know, let's say 6 feet, so 72 inches. And a static final int with a default weight. And again, I'm making up numbers here. They don't really mean anything. It would be something that someone would figure out. All right? So now that I've got those in there, I don't have, I've got something I can set all this to. I think you'd agree with that. Def first, def last, def height, and def weight. All right? So you've got somebody with a first name of no first name, with a last name of no last name, a height of 72, and a weight. We could have made those 0. We could, which would give them a BMI of 0. We could do that. The reason I'm telling you this, the reason that this is important, is the day is going to come in here when we're going to be working with databases in Android. And what you want to make sure is that if you're grabbing information and now you're going to put it out to a database, you want to make sure that if it says that this field is mandatory, that you don't leave it blank. All right. And when you create databases, you can put conditions on there. You can do the equivalent of almost programming. So we could say, that you have to have a height that's within a certain range or a weight within a certain range. So if we made those 0, all right, it may fail when we're trying to save it to the database. All right, so I've got all this stuff in there. So I'm going to do a file. Again, I'll do it just to save all, and I'm going to jump back here. So in here, then I can say first name equals def first. Last name equals def last. Height. Call it height. Yes, I did. Height equals def height. Weight equals def weight. Like that. All right. So I can be sure, don't type this in, but if later I come in and I type in BMI 02 Bob equals new BMI 02, then if I printed out Bob.first name, it's going to give me that no first name. If I printed out Bob.last name, no last name, etc. All right? All right. Then we're going to do also a full arc constructor, meaning we're going to pass in all 4 values. Now, I do want to mention something to you. I started saying this before, but I rudely cut myself off, and that is this. Now, if I just do this, this should make sense to you right now. If I come in here and do this, you should understand immediately why that's not working, because those 2 signatures currently are the same. You can't do that. All right? But what I want you to understand is I'm going to have 2 constructors. One that passes in nothing, one that passes in everything. Okay? The reason that that's important, imagine that we had a case where we were reading in a person's first name, their middle name, and their last name. All right? So I'm not going to add that, but let's just say we added that in here. All right? There are people in this world who do not have a middle name. All right? So in that case, I might want to come in and instead of not just a full arc constructor with that in there, I might want to have a constructor without a middle name. See what I'm saying? So when I set up constructors, as long as what's in the parens is different, either the number of arguments is different, or the type of arguments are different, or both, I can overload it as many times as I want to or need to. Not only that, what you're going to see once we get into Android, you can overload any function. All right. Plus, we're going to get into talking about overloading and overriding. We're going to get into all that stuff as we go on. So I'm going to come in here, and let's do it the way you'll oftentimes see it. So I'm going to type in string first name. I'm going to give them the exact same names. String last name, int height, and int weight. You don't have to put them on multiple lines like I'm doing. I just want to make sure you can read it. All right, you want to put it on multiple lines, who cares? You're not turning this in anyway. Now, if I do this, first name equal first name. Notice it's wrong. Because what it's attempting to do then is it's attempting to grab this one and assign it to itself. So if I use the exact same names in here, then I must preface this with the word this. Then it's just fine. All right? Now, in here, I'm just putting this in right now. Okay? We might go back and change it later like we did yesterday and call the set first name and then call the set last name. For now, we'll just leave it like this. All right? And I'm never really, for the life of me, understood why, but for whatever reason, having to use the word this like that, like we're just showing, it, in the past when I've had certain students, it bothers them. They just don't like doing it. Well, if you don't like doing it, then just call this FN, call this LN, call this H, and call this W. Then you don't need this. That said, I will tell you that there are plenty of programmers who use this whether they need to or not. They're just used to doing it that way, so they do it that way. All right. Now, We'll come in and do what we did yesterday. What do I mean? Let's get down to right near the bottom here. And let's first come in and let's right mouse click and do a generate. We'll do our getters and setters like yesterday. We want one for first name. We want one for last name. We want one for height. We want one for weight. We don't need them for BMI. We don't need them for status. All right? I guess we probably could. We could do a set BMI and a get BMI. Or did I even do those in here like that? I don't know if I did it or I did them as separate routines. No, I guess I did. All right, now let's try it like that. Let's do all of them except for the pattern decimal format. So do all those. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If we have to change it later, we can. It's no big thing. All right, so there it is. And then get down to the bottom of that, please. So again, we're down near the bottom. We're up near 100 lines already. Right mouse click. Go to generate again. And go to our toString, just like we did the other day. And we'll want to print out everything. So there you go. Now, for right now, I'm not going to change this. So it's going to be ugly as heck when it prints out. So we can always go back and change that. It's no big thing one way or the other. All right, everybody with me? Okay. All right. I do want you to get into the mindset, though, like with this, that this just makes sense to you. That every time you've got a getter, it's got to have a return type, because that's all it's doing is returning something. All right? There are going to be times when you might want to have a getter and not have a setter. There might be a very good reason for doing that. All right? I don't think I've ever seen an occasion where the opposite is true, where you have a setter and not a getter. I'm not saying that's impossible, but I can't think of a situation where you would do that. All right. So we'll do this very similar to what we did yesterday. Now, if we did this, this is fine. Okay? But if we happen, since it's a string, if we happen to pass in the empty string, it's going to accept that. That makes sense? And that's the only time that we're, so if somebody goes and creates a new object, a new BMI02 object, and for first name and last name or anything that's a string in here, it passes in double quote, as of right now, that's what it's going to set it to. We don't want that. So we'll come in here and just say this. So we've got, again, here we've got string first name, this first name equal first name, fine. All right, so I'm going to change this to not f dot equals the empty string. All right, so if it's not empty, okay, which means it's good. All right, whoops. Then we want to accept the first name. All right, otherwise, and I'm running out of room here, so I think I'm missing a paren. F dot equals, there we go. Nope. So what did I do wrong here? So hold on. Because it's question mark, the colon comes second. I don't know what's in my head right now. But, okay. Now, I'm going to put this on 2 lines. I like to do it like this because I think it makes it easier to read. If you don't agree, don't do it. All right? But looking at this right now, and I think now I do need the paren here. Yep. This is something that has to make sense to you. We could have done this using a straight if statement. It would have worked just fine. But this says, if the first name is not blank, that's what this is saying right here. If the first name is not blank, then take that, whatever was passed in, and assign it to our class variable. If it is blank, okay, so we could have done a reverse test too. We could have said first name equals without this. We could have moved that and then put this here. I like to put the one that's going to happen the most often first. To me, that makes more sense to do that. All right? Now, since the next one that we're going to change is set last name, I'm going to copy this. You don't have to. You can type it in yourselves again if you want to. But I'm going to put that in here, and I'm going to change all these to last. and I've said this to you on more than one occasion, that if you're going to do that, start doing a bunch of copy and paste, double check, go back. So notice last name, last name, last name, last name, last name, last. All right? And that's what you always want to make sure to do. And again, I realize that, oh yeah, whatever. And I know it sounds simple, but it is important that you realize that. All right? All right. Now, we can do height. So again, with our set height, we can do the same kind of thing. All right, it won't be exactly the same, but we'll come in here and we'll say, if height is greater than or equal to the min height, and the height is less than or equal to the max height. Okay, I'm running out of room here, but you see what I'm doing. All right, make this a little smaller so you can see it there. So if that's the case, all right, and I can put these, I can do the question mark colon on different lines or however I want to do this. So I'm going to say question mark, so it's legal. So height, colon, def height. All right, and again, if I make this small enough, I can make it small enough so that you can all read it on one line. See what I'm saying? When I did it on mine, I had it on one line, is what I'm telling you. All right, but I printed it off in a smaller font. And again, the weight is going to be done the same way, so I'm going to copy what I just did for the height, come down to my set weight, paste that in, and change all those H's to W's. So, wait. Looks okay to me. All right. All right, then we come down to get BMI. I should say set BMI. What you're going to find is quite often when you do this, this might be a time when you've got a getter and not a setter, and you actually do this in here. Do you remember, I said this to you, I think it was yesterday, it must have been, that you never want stale data. All right? So yeah, we're going to be returning the BMI, but if we remove this one, if we remove the set, in fact, let's not even remove it. I'll comment it out, okay? So I'm going to comment that out. I know there's a way to do that faster, but I'll just do it like this. Not like that. All right. But I'm going to put the code in that I would normally put in here. So I'm going to put in return, and I'll put in here get weight. All right. I'm going to divide that by, just like we math.pow, and we'll have get height to, again, because there's many ways that you can write this, times 703. You're going to know when we put in the first height and weight whether or not if I put in a bad formula. All right? You should always do a couple of these yourself. Plus, if you've never done this before, you can go out to the internet and just type in BMI calculator. All right? So I'm not setting it. I always want to make sure that it's the most up-to-date. Okay? And, everybody have this? I'm going to do the same thing with the status. In other words, I'm going to comment out this set status. All right? And I'm going to come in here, and where I've got return status, that's totally fine. But I'm going to put some other code in front of it. In fact, first, let's say string, instead of status, let's just call it S. And we'll set it to the equal to the empty string rather, and that's what we're going to end up returning. Okay? Now, there's more stuff that we've got to do in here, all right? But we need the BMI. Would you agree with that? If we want to find the status, we need the BMI. Well, we could pass it in, but again, that kind of goes against the idea of object-oriented programming, because we can get it right here. We can come in and say double BMI equals get BMI. And then we're always sure we're going to have the most up-to-date BMI there is. We're always going to be sure that the state of our BMI02 object that we're about to create has got, the idea is if some of the data has been changed in an object, but not all of it, and it hasn't been updated, that's what's known as the object having stale data. And one thing you want to make sure is that never happens. Now, with BMI, it's probably not that big a thing. But think about this if you were actually doing some kind of an application for a hospital. And maybe it was somebody's, glucose level or something like that. All right? These could have bad ramifications if you had some data that was updated and some data that was not updated. All right? Okay. So, oops, that's nice. Now, if you don't want to call that BMI because you've already got something called BMI, you with me? We can give it another name too. So I can call it the BMI, or not VMI. Put your fingers on the right keys. You can do that. You don't have to, but you can do that if you want to. All right? So we're going to do this, and we're going to say, very similar to what we did before, if the BMI is less than min optimal. All right, so that meaning if it's less than 18.5, then our status is going to be underweight. All right, that should make sense to everybody. So that's going to handle everybody who is really, 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 really skinny. All right, too skinny for their own good. So I'm going to come up here and say else if the BMI is less than the max opt. And notice that when you do this too, notice it actually shows you right here. All right. And if I click on it, it's showing me that amount. All right. Now, why is that important? It's important because what it's doing, even though I'm in BMI02.java, it's going out to the ibmi.java file to find that information. All right. So, if it's less than max opt, well, then we know their status is, I'll just say optimal weight. You can put this in there any way you want. It doesn't matter. All right. So that handles the first two cases. Else if the BMI is less than min OBE, which means that it's less than 30. Now remember the way that if statements work. I'm not going to insult your intelligence, but just remember, as soon as it finds one that's true, it throws the rest away. So if it gets down to here, the BMI had to have been 18.5 or above. You should know that. If it gets down to here, the BMI had to be 25 or above. So we're checking to see if it's 25 or above, but less than 30. And if that's the case, they're overweight. All right? Then, again, it's up to us. We can either just put a regular else in here, and that's what I did for it, and we can say that the status is equal to obese. Now that technically should handle any number that gets in there. Because this, even if it was some really abnormal number, that's everything that's less than 18.5, and that is now everything that's greater than 30, greater than or equal to 30. All right, so it should handle it. But we could have come in here and put another else if in instead, and said if the BMI is, testing for some ungodly number or doing whatever, if there was some reason for doing that. I can't think of one, but if there was. All right. Okay. then we got this toString. The only thing I am going to change on here on the toString is I am going to format it because we made our format pattern, right? I just called it pattern. So I'm going to say pattern dot format, and we'll format the BMI. Now, if you have any desire to, you can go back and change this any way you want, right? That's no big thing one way or the other. All right? Now, right now, there's a problem, though. Well, no, there really isn't. We're returning this. This is the string that we're returning. Again, if you don't like the way it's formatted, go ahead and change it. All right? Now, believe it or not, that is it. But as you know, because we did this before, we've now got an interface file. We've now got a Java file. We don't have a driver. All right? So we're going to add that. So I'm going to come in here and do a file, save all, and then I'm going to come back over to here. And again, you don't have to do it this way, but since my program, the name of my class is BMI02, I'm going to call my driver BMI02 driver. And it'll probably come back in and ask me again if I want to add this to my Git repo. There it did. Yes, I do. All right. Now, I'm going to give you exactly what I had here, but I didn't make every test that I had to make. All right, I created 4 or 5, 1, 2, 3, 4 of them, I guess, 4 different ones. All right, why? Just to get some practice doing it. That's it. So, started with BMI 02, and I called him default Don. And I set him equal to a new BMI 02. Now, you should already know this. If I type in SOUT, oops, come on, try it again, SOUT tab, why isn't it doing it? Okay, that's fine. So system dot out dot println, and if I come in there and print out, why it's doing that? What it is. All right. Default Don. So it's telling me that it doesn't like something that I've done here. So let's see.
You haven't done the main.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, you're right. So PSVM tab, and put that in there. Thank you. And there we go. All right. So what should that print out? It should print out for the first name, no first name. For the last name, no last name. For the height, it should print out, but it should do everything, in other words. All right. Well, let's check. So I'm going to do a file, and I'm going to do another save all, and I'm going to run this. Now, I didn't notice there's no line breaks, but it is first name is no first name, last name is no last name, height is 72, weight is 75. It did not calculate a BMI, so I'd have to check that. Since it didn't calculate a BMI, the status is no. So all that makes sense, though? So again, let's fix that.
Do you think we have to call get BMI somewhere?
We're going to look at that right now. Okay? Now, here we've got BMI equals, I guess we could do it right there. All right? We should be able to come in here. I don't know why we couldn't call get BMI right there. You're right. All right? And we're probably also, for the status, we're going to have to do the same thing. Now, let's take it a step further. Could we come in here and do this? Get first name, get last name, get height, get weight, pattern, get BMI, and for the status, get, what do we call it, get status? Like that. All right? To me, that probably looks about as clean as we can get it. Now, what I'm going to do is on each one of these, I don't even know, all this slash here means is that we want to continue it on the same line. And we don't. So I'm going to replace all those slashes with \n. All right? And we should be able to fix this pretty easily. All right, so plus \n. Oops. We can use double quotes here and here. \n and then another plus. Now, I'm not really prettying it up much, but in my opinion at least, it's now going to be a little bit more readable. All right, plus, and again, we'll need a \n plus. And that should do it. All right. So we could even do that here. Let's see. So I've got this BMI 02. I don't even need this. Just bring that up. And then I don't need, I can kind of stop it right here, I believe. See if I get any errors for doing that. All right. So file save. Save all, and let's try to run it again. And see if the output looks a little bit more digestible or whatever. Oh my goodness, what do I got now? Enter a height. Cancel that. I must have copied something over. Does everybody understand where I'm going with this? All right. The problem is, I didn't run, what I ran right there is, I think I ran this file. I didn't run the driver file. So let me do another file. Save all. Move over to the driver. And do a run. And run the driver. There you go. So, no first name, no last name, 72, 175, 20. So I know at least everything is working. That stuff is working. All right. And then at a minimum, what I would want to do is I would want to create an object, a BMI 02 object, not just for the default, but I'd want to create an underweight. I'd want to create an overweight. I'd want to create an optimal weight, etc., and an obese. Does that make sense? And I'd want to create one that was good for all of them. But then I'd want to start testing my fringe cases. So I would want a height that was less than 12. I would want a weight that's greater than 777, etc. And that's the kind of thing that you have to do when you are writing this kind of stuff. All right? So I'll put in what I had in here. A couple more of these. Now remember, true or false, I can now come in here and do this. Default Don dot set first name to Don. Default Don dot set last name, and we'll make it Don1. And I'm just going to do those two because the other ones actually have valid values in there. And then if I come in here and print this out again, right there, now I should have first name Don, last name Juan. All right, but what that does right there is it at least gives me the chance to go in and make sure that my set routines are indeed working. I already know, for example, I know that my set status is working, and I know that my get status, remember we don't have a set status, my get status and my get BMI, I know those are working. Now I could come in, let's just say Don put on a lot of weight. So I could say default Don dot set weight, all right, and I could say now it's 200 pounds, for example. And let's say he's gotten older and he's shrinking. So he's not 72 anymore. Whoops. He is now 70. Okay? So now what I've done is all of my set methods, I have tried those. So if I do that and I come in there and do a file, save all, and run it again, and bring this up. There it is, Don Juan 70. So all that stuff is working. Now, I'm not going to waste your time here, but I'm just going to make one more. So again, this would be the default case. All right, and this would be the setters for the default case. Let's just make one more though. So I'm going to say, you know what? Again, I guess I was cute here, so I said BMI 02, and I called her Skinny Sue. And I said equals new BMI 02, and I'm going to put this on another line just so you can read it. And for the first name, I said Skinny. For the last name, I said Sue. For the height, I said 66, and for the weight, I said 100. All right? Now you can see all this stuff in here, so you can see, again, they refer to these as hints. You're all with me here? So first name, last name, don't you type that stuff in. All right, so I've got that. And now if I do my system.out.println for Skinny Sue, and let's do this first. Let's do a \n. Oops, gotta put that in double quotes. \n. I think that'll take that. Okay, plus, and I'm going to add this to the first one too, because they ran together before. So I'm going to do that. Okay. All right. Let's save it and run it to see if it works. So again, there's my default. There's my default changed. All right. And there's my Skinny. So I could make other ones for optimal. I called it Ollie Optimal, and I created one, overweight Oscar and obese Olga. So I made those. But the point is, with all those, I just checked the actual working cases. You would still, as I mentioned previously, you would still want to go in and make sure that you were testing and you basically that you were looking at things that were out of whack, for lack of better words. Now, I can do that real quickly right here. And what I mean is, for Sue, I'm going to just give her a height that's wrong. She'll be the devil. 666, and I'll give her a weight of 1,000. All right? And I'm going to save that. All right? And then I'm going to run it. So you'll see in here, wow, it took the height, it took the weight.
Oh, you're blocking it. Let's shut up.
What's that?
You're blocking it with your shoulder.
So either my check was wrong or something was wrong in here because it shouldn't have allowed 666. All right. Oh, I think I know why I did. So let's look. Remember in here, we just set it. But now I think what I want to do instead is I want to call the setters in here. So here I want to call set first name and pass it in the first name. Set last name, pass it in the last name. Set height, etc. So. And if I didn't do that, do I have to do that? The answer is no. But if I didn't do that, then I'd have to go back in and basically replicate the logic that I did in the set routines. All right.
But then you're repeating yourself.
Where?
Then you duplicate what you
I
did
said
in-
if I did put that in there, I would be repeating myself. That's why I did it this way.
Okay.
But I know of programmers who say no, you shouldn't be calling, because when you are instantiating an object, you should have all the code that you, for the instantiation you want to do, should be in there. See what I'm saying? So, I mean, there's different schools of thought, all right, with a lot of this stuff. So I've got that. Let me do another file, save all, jump back into the driver, and run it. And now you'll notice that it reset the height for Sue to 72 and the weight for Sue to 175. So that worked okay. All right. Now that's not how I would test. All right. And what you're probably going to end up doing is if you start writing enough of these, you're going to start commenting this line out. And you only want to print out one at a time so you can see what's going on. Okay? And probably too, we know also now in here, we know that that appears to be working just fine. All right? So we basically, other than, like I said, fringe cases and the like, we basically tested the entire program. All right? All right. Let's see what to do here. All right. We're going to add a couple more files in here. Let's see, 1, 2, yeah, that'll work. We'll add a couple more files. So what I want you to do next, we'll just modify this program, all right? But we're going to put some checking in here with try-catch, okay? So right now it works. So we got two choices. You know, we can either make a new project and copy everything over and do that, or just work with this one. I'm going to work with this one, all right? So I'm going to come up here, and in my source, well, I'm not actually adding anything new. I'm going to come in and add a couple new files. So I'm going to come in here and go to Java class. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to call these, I'm going to make two of them. I'm going to have a BMI height exception and a BMI weight exception. I could just call them height exception and weight exception, and that's totally fine to do. But since it's my BMI program, I'm going to add that. So in here for the name, I'm going to call the first one BMI height exception. Just like that. Do I want to add that? Yes, I do. And I might as well just get the other one out of the way right now. So I'll add one more. And this is going to be another class, and this is going to be a BMI weight exception. So I now have two of them, and yes, I want to add that as well. All right. So I now have in here a height exception and a weight exception. Doesn't matter which one we do first. I just got the height here, so I'm going to do that. All right. Now, one thing is when you create your own exception, what you must do, and this is the first time we're doing any inheritance, you must say extends exception. You must say that. All right. Why? Because that's basically allowing all the stuff that's available to the exception class to be available to this class that we're creating right here. And I'm going to add it to the other one in just a couple minutes, but that's fine for right now. All right. The other thing is, what we want to do is we want to come in here and we want to check to make sure that it's within range, correct? Isn't that going to be our exception? So not only do we want to extend exception, whoops, try that. We also want to come in here and say implements BMI. Now I'm asking you this question. Does that make sense to everybody? We are inheriting from one class and we are implementing an interface. All right? This is a standard Java class exception. It's not one we created. All right? This is something that we created. All right? Okay. The good news about this is there's not much we have to put in here. They're both going to be very small. In fact, we're going to be able to copy all this information into the other one and just change the height to weight. Okay? So I'm going to come in here and say public BMI height exception, paren. And again, I'm going to show you this. This isn't, all I can tell you is, why do you do it like this? Because you do it like this. all right, which is a really stupid reason, but that's the only one I can give you. So you come in here and you say super, and I'm going to put in here height, input, error. Height must be, now I'm running out of room, so I'm going to put a plus sign here. You don't have to do that. But I'm going to say between min height and max height. And that's all of it. Now we're going to have to make changes to our other programs in here, but I'm going to grab this and everything after the extends right here, all this, I'm just going to copy all of that to the clipboard right there. You do it any way you want to do it, but I'm going to do it that way. And then I'm going to go over to my weight exception, and I'm just going to paste it in. But I do have to make changes, of course. So this has got to be a W. So everywhere I've got in here height, I want to change it to weight. Now I'm asking you this question. Does what we just did make sense to you? All right. We have just created our own exceptions. The way we handled this before is we used if statements, which is a totally fine way to do this. Again, there has been debate over the years as far as the best way to do it. I mentioned this to you in other classes. There's really three ways to handle it. One is to do nothing and hope you always have good data. You don't ever want to do that. Unless you're putting in the data and you totally 100% trust yourself, no, you don't ever want to do that. So you can either not let bad data into the system. You cannot not let it in by using ifs. That's what we did before, right? We used a while loop with our tests for our data validation. Or you can use this. Now, when we get these exceptions, I don't like doing it this way. All right, so basically all we're going to end up doing is when we throw this exception, the program's going to be dead in the water, basically. All right, it's going to come in and it's going to say this, but I do want to make sure that that works. All right, so as you would probably guess, the two things that we're going to have to worry about changing in here are going to be set height and set weight. That makes sense? So I'm going to go back to here, and I am going to make some, at least, maybe not even superficial, but I'm going to make some changes. What do I mean? Well, when we did our set height and set weight in here, we did it like this, and there's nothing wrong with that. All right? But in here, it's not going to read very well. So I am going to just take this whole thing right here for my, let's do the height first, I guess. So I'm going to go to my set height. I'm just going to remove what's in there. All right? And I'm going to actually put this in as an if statement. So I'm going to say if the height is greater than or equal to the min height and the height is less than or equal to the max height, well, you know then it's a valid height. You all know that. It's within range. All right? So, if it is within range, then we can say this dot height equals height. All right? Boom. But if we get an else, now we can come in and we can throw our exception. Now, by doing that, what doesn't it like? Oh, I think we're going to have to add a file here. Let's see. Remove braces for the else statement. What doesn't it like? Remove braces from else statement. There's nothing wrong with that. Throw new BMI height exception. Okay, I'm getting perplexed here. I'm trying to figure out what would be wrong with that.
Should it be like a try-catch?
No, we don't need a try-catch in here. We could do it as a try-catch, all right? So we could come in here, I believe, and rewrite it as a try-catch. I wrote it in here exactly like I just showed you. Height is dot height equal height, else throw do BMI height exception. All right, well, let's see. Showing unhandled exception. It says add exception to method signature. Ah, okay. So see where it says here, add exception to method to signature? I'm going to click that. That's the problem. We have to let it know, all right, that it's possible that this particular file could end up throwing an exception. This doesn't mean it throws it. This means that it can potentially throw it. All right, and there's a big difference between that. And I'm looking here and it says one related problem. So what doesn't it like here? All right, default set height. We'll have to go back and look at that in just a minute. That's fine. Now that we've done that one, you can already hopefully tell that for the set weight, it's going to virtually again be the same thing. So I'm going to copy this, go down to here, remove what's in here, and change all these to W's. And this will have to say throws BMI weight exception. All right, now it's still saying a related problem. I'm not going to worry about that at this second. All right, but I want to explain to you right now why what we're doing right now is so important. When we get into, when we're working, hopefully starting, mid next week, into Android, all right? When you are setting up Android, we're going to end up, at least at the beginning, running our code through an emulator, okay? When you run your code through an emulator, you get to, if you want to, you get to tell Android what kind of keyboard you want. So in here, we would make it a numeric keyboard. Does that make sense to everybody? All right, so we'd make it a numeric keyboard. All right, great. All right, but, okay, so we've got this numeric keyboard, but what if we leave our thing blank? That's the kind of thing we're going to have to search for. And it's very similar to having a number field in HTML. All right, when we set something up like that. And actually, it's better than it is with a number field in HTML. All right. So, let's see, we've got here.
You gotta add throws, BMI weight.
In here too? Yeah, I suppose. So.
BMI driver. Or
I think it's, isn't it like this? All right, and it's any place in here now where I'm calling set weight or set height, Not in there, but in main. So in here, I believe we're going to have to add it too.
Yeah.
So any place where we are calling any place in here where we are calling set this or set that. And in fact,
You don't need
why-
that.
I don't need the throws. I don't know why I keep doing that. All right. And that should have fixed it. Now, the bad news is that, what did I show you before? Like when we came in here and did this 666, etc., it'll throw it, but right now it's going to kill the program. There has been debate for many years over whether it's best to validate data using while loops, if statements, etc., versus using exception handling. Exception handling historically has been slow. All right, it can be error prone. You're kind of seeing that right here. All right, but there are all sorts of built-in exceptions. Plus, there are things we're not doing here that we could do. Just because you throw an exception does not mean you necessarily have to make the program stop running. You may or may not remember that from the C# class, where we did some try-catch and we threw some stuff. All right? Now, what we're doing here, and I want to go back because somebody brought this up before, and that is, when I come back to here, and you said, well, can't we put that into a try-catch? The answer is, technically, yes. Okay? And in fact, we could put almost, you could take literally almost every line of code you write and put it in a try-catch. But again, it slows down processing tremendously. And there are a lot of schools of thought that what you are doing when you are using try-catch is you're letting bad data into the system and then you're dealing with it. Whereas if you use while loops and if statements, etc., you're never letting the bad data in to begin with. See the difference? All right. So, I mean, for years, I have listened to people and read articles on this, which is better. All right. But there's a big school of thought that says, hey, there are, if I go into, and I haven't really talked about this yet, I think we looked at it, but maybe even last semester I might have shown you guys and probably not you guys. But if I go out to java.sun.com, that was the old one, and it's going to push me off because Oracle bought them. So it pushes me off to oracle.com/java/technologies, and I got to look in here. I don't know where it is, but the newest downloads, somewhere in here, I want to find basically the API. And what it's going to show you if you look through there is there are somewhere upwards of at least 50, I think closer to 100 built-in exceptions. I just showed you creating your own. Now, there are exceptions that are more similar to like an out-of-range exception, so we could have called that. But I wanted to show you a customized exception. All right, and typically with a customized exception, you throw it like that. All right. All right, I'm going to send you why, because this again is going to be another program that we're going to do, and you can start on it now. It's 3:10, so you can work on it. If you got another class and you want to work on that, I don't really care. But this is it. I'm going to send it to you. I'm going to give you a hard copy in just a minute. And we may have even done this before, but it's the old Java guess a number game. Don't worry about doing with getters and setters. Just write it regular. All right? The reason that I like this program is when you work in Android, every screen that you have, every screen is called an activity. So if you built a game that had an opening screen and it had 5 levels, you'd have 6 activities. Does that make sense? All right. But when we build this one, we typically have a very simple interface that'll ask, we don't even care about the name so much, just the height and the weight. Boom, you put that in, it'll validate it, and it'll give you a BMI, and it'll give you a status type of thing. All right? And that's fine. Same kind of thing with guess the number. You'll go in, you'll just make a guess, and if it's out of range, you say, no, it's out of range. We'll have a numeric keyboard So you cannot put anything in there except numbers or a blank. If it's blank, we'll say it's blank. All right. But if you put in a number, we'll put what's called a toast, which is a message on the bottom of your screen, and it'll say, guess too low, try again. All right. And then we'll have the screen clear, and boom, we'll put the cursor there, and boom, you can make another guess. Fine and dandy. So it takes you 6 tries, let's just say. Okay? So what you do is, that's one activity. Then we make another activity that says, if you guess it within 4 guesses, you're an expert. So it pushes you off to another activity, and you put an image in there that says, expert, or whatever it is you want to put in there. If it's between like 5 and 10, you say average, and if it's over that, you say novice. That's what I've had people do in the past. Plus, one of the other things we can do is we can come in there then, and we can start keeping track of games. And in other words, if you play it, let's say 12 times, and 3 times you were an expert, 2 times you were average, etc., that can be another activity. And that shows you how to use what are called intents, which allows you to move from one activity or one screen to another. And that's why I'm giving you this. All right? So it's a guess the number game. For each game, the program should choose a random number. How do you do that in Java? Just Google random number Java. All right? The random number that gets generated should be between 1 and 100. That's the valid range. All right, then challenge the person running the program to guess the number in as few turns as possible. If you don't know this, I probably have already told it to you, but I'm going to pretend the number is 87. Okay, I just made that number up. So say 50. All right, so you say, no, it's higher. So you know already you've thrown out half the numbers. You say 75, they say higher. Now you've thrown out 75% of the numbers. All right, and the next one up really would be about 87 in between there, and that would give it to you. But if you do that, you can typically guess almost any number. All right, I mean, if it's between 1 and a gazillion, no. But if it's something like this, in a very minimal number of guesses. All right, for each game, keep track of the number of valid guesses. What's a valid guess? A valid guess means it's numeric. A valid guess means it's greater than or equal to 1 and less than or equal to 100. But I put a little wrinkle on this in here someplace. Oh, here we go. I'd like you to keep track. So if I say 53, and let's say the number was 87. So I say 53 and you go higher. And I say 53 again. I don't want you to say higher. I want you to say, you've already guessed that number. Because that'll make you think. All right? Now, this can be done in different ways. You can use an array. And arrays in Java are almost identical to the way we set them up in C#. Or you can use what's called an array list. The difference between an array and an array list is an array is a fixed size in this language, like it is in C#. An array list is mutable. So if you wanted to use an array list, it could be an empty array list. I guess 17, and you go higher. Now I can take that 17 and I can put it in there in guessed numbers. So if somebody says 17 again, I can first have them loop through that list. See what I'm saying? I've had people do it that way. I've had people sit there and make Boolean arrays, and do it like that. There's a bunch of different ways that this can be done. I'm going to send this to you right now so you can get a read on it and at least start thinking about how to set it up. Now, I've got due at the end of the period on Friday. It's not going to be. Let's say it will be due at the end of the period on Monday. All right? And again, if for some reason you struggle, you can't get it, do as much as you can. That's what I'll tell you. So where do I have this? I think I've got it. On the desktop. Yep, good. Program 2. All right. should all have it. So like I said, if nothing else, if you have nothing else to do in here today, just plan out how you're going to create it. Or take a look at the documentation. I've given you some documentation in there. For instance, there is like an is numeric type of thing for Java where you can write your own. I gave you a link to that, etc. And we'll end up going over that probably on Monday. All right. What I'd like to do tomorrow is one last iteration of this payroll program where we're putting everything together. And again, we'll have an interface. And again, we'll have some exception handling in there. All right? And then if we get that done tomorrow, and let's just say it takes till 2. I don't know what it'll take, but let's say it's 2. Then the rest of the period will be lab for you to work on this. All right? And I will give you probably, depending on, we'll see where people are, maybe Monday to work on it too. And then then Monday when you leave, when you leave on Monday, I'll give you the test that you're going to do. All right? And you can work at that at home, you can work, and I'll give you at least the next class period to work on. It's really and truly not a hard test. All right? I'll find it sometime. Thank you.